Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson, and I have the O'Brien sisters here to talk about how women are responding to the news of peak oil. But first, let's have energy news with Rick.
Thanks, Janaea. Starting with food news, in a recent article in the grist mill, they refer to an article in the Wall Street Journal over a year ago reporting that the U.S. would be a net importer of food by the end of the year 2005. This is, of course, a serious food security issue. At the time of the report, the data was not available, but the USDA Economic Research Service just published data that shows a very scary trend. As of January of this year, they show a yearly trade balance of only $79 million versus $12 billion 4 years ago and $5 billion in 2005. As this trend continues, we expect to be solidly in the net food importer category by year's end. In simple terms, this means we import more food than we export, that we depend on imported food to feed ourselves. Some examples. It is now cheaper to import an artichoke from South America than it is to buy it from Watsonville, California, which is only about 200 miles from here. California now imports a net $5 billion worth of food annually. Raspberries are cheaper if imported from China, Japan, or elsewhere in Asia. Food in general travels 1,500 miles from producer to consumer in this country. That takes a lot of transport fuel that can only get more expensive and harder to get. Farmers in Minnesota alone have lost $1 billion a year in producing crops and livestock for the past 7 years. This leaves us in a very vulnerable food supply situation. If we are dependent on foreign food and oil when peak oil comes to pass, likely near the end of this decade, then we'll be in very serious trouble. Something to ponder when you sit down to your next meal. In 5 or 10 years, where will your next meal be coming from? In alternative fuel news from Ag Observatory, late last year a South American tanker loaded with biodiesel docked at a Florida port. You'd think that would be good news, yet another source of renewable biodiesel. But Minnesotan farmers who supply biodiesel soy oil are angry at that the South American tanker qualified for a U.S. biodiesel tax break. It turns out that under various free trade agreements, the biodiesel and ethanol coming from South America is entitled to the same tax breaks as the same products produced within our borders. So now the Midwestern farmers who thought they had cornered the renewable biodiesel and ethanol markets here are finding out they have some serious competition from south of the border. Imagine that. In the long run, this kind of competition could lead to lower prices for these renewable fuels. Finally, maybe there will be some good news at the pump if you've burned biodiesel or ethanol, and another reason to consider a flex fuel vehicle the next time you need a new one. Here's some news from China. The New York Times reports that China is getting serious about saving energy and natural resources. So much so, they are going to tax disposable chopsticks starting on April 1st. No fooling. Other new increased taxes will be levied on vehicles with engines larger than 2 liters, yachts, wood floor planking, luxury watches, golfing equipment, and some oil products. Tax rates for SUVs with engines over 4 liters will go up to 20%, so you can forget that Hummer in China unless you have money to burn. China also reported last week that they will be increasing the cost of domestic oil, but there will still be subsidies for farmers, fishermen, and urban mass transit. This is the first increase there in 8 months. SustainLane.com has just released their list of top 10 best cities best prepared for peak oil. If oil were $100 a barrel, it's only $65 a barrel now. Which cities would be able to survive economically? Here's their top 10. New York, Boston, San Francisco, Chicago, Philadelphia, Portland, Oregon, Honolulu, Seattle, Baltimore, and last but not least, Oakland, California. Great to see 2 Bay Area cities made the list, but hey, let's not all pack up and move there all at once. Much of this rating was based on cities having effective mass transit versus such things as the availability of food or fuel for travel or heating. There is much to consider before relocating anywhere. Reported today in our local newspaper, The Union, a local conference here last Saturday called Come Home to Eat hosted 300 farmers and consumers concerned about growing and eating locally produced food. At lunch, attendees feasted on a variety of locally produced foods. The conference was thought to be productive and successful by those who participated. That's our news for now, so back to Janaea and her guest.
Thanks, Rick. you know, the question of how we will eat and what the news was saying there about food coming from very far away being cheaper now than our locally grown food, which is, and the trade balance being, that's a real concern. Part of what we could see with Come Home to Eat is the suggestion that everybody be growing their food. To be growing something. I'm here with sisters Karen O'Brien, Loretta O'Brien. Thanks for joining me and joining us at Peak Moment. Let's take a look at how you began to respond to the news of peak oil in changing your own lives, your own family lives, your lifestyles. You, Karen, decided to move. Mm-hmm. So tell us what factored into that and tell us about where you moved to. Mm-hmm.
Well, we were living in Nevada City, a couple miles outside of the center of town, and we realized that the well that we had would probably not sustain our own agricultural needs. And in addition to the fact we would have to cut down a lot of trees to get our solar system up and running, so we looked outside of town. So now we moved, 20 minutes outside of town up on the ridge, and we bought 40 acres. Mm-hmm. And the search was an interesting one because not only did we want to find out where we wanted to be, in terms of being close to people that we had with whom we shared these ideas and values, but we debated about this issue because the further out you are, the more you use petroleum.
Transport to get back into town.
It was a tough trade-off, and we decided to go for it out there because there were a number of people who had known about this for many, many years, even decades, and had been living sustainable lives out there. So we made the trip out there, and it took us about 6 months or so to find the land. In the process of that, we were trying to figure out with our family, would anybody like to join us for this? Would the family come together? Would we all do our own separate things? And so we got this 40 acres figuring that if anybody wanted to come, they could come on down. But we were going to get started. We were in the position to go ahead and do that. So that is what we did. We packed up and we showed up about, February last year, so we've been there for a year.
Okay, so let's take a little bit of a tour of part of your homestead on the San Juan Ridge there. Mm-hmm. Here we go.
So this is my husband, Kevin. He is the master of technology, so we have this really interesting juxtaposition of low-tech and high-tech up at our place. So here we are attempting to get the garden going, and it wasn't until probably 6 months into our life up there that Kevin realized I had no idea what to do with a garden. so the learning curve is very steep, but eventually I did create something here. So we have the massive squash plants out of control grabbing you as you walk by. Didn't really know what kind of space they would need. But we have, this is our medicine wheel. We decided as part of it that we needed to have edible things, medicinal things, culinary herbs. So this is a peace pole in the middle designed after a Native American medicine wheel. And that little ball up there is actually a stone that for us represents the world, so that we kind of remember that this whole thing is really not just about us, but about the world.
What a nice thought.
And this is my first keyhole bed. It took me many hours to dig this, but it's based on the idea of permaculture. I'm using up as little space as possible to create high density volume. And that's my daughter's chair in the middle of it. That was her locale. So
what a nice little place in the center of her world, huh?
Yeah. And I have no drip system at this point, so I water twice a day, which actually is a positive thing in some ways because it's connecting me to that process on a daily basis, it's been. Mm-hmm. And then this, we are off the grid, and we needed to increase our solar energy. We had a couple of panels were on the property when we got there. The house was there, and we just brought more in so that eventually, hopefully, with the new batteries we have, we'll be completely independent even from the propane that we have for the generator. And here's the sun oven, which is very, very useful and a lot of fun because you're just using absolutely no energy to create food, including the granola and iced tea and all that.
What else do you cook in your, that's wonderful. What else do you cook in your sun oven?
Little casserole, squash. You take them right literally out of the garden and send them right into the sun oven. My husband, I'm a vegetarian, but he gets the whole chicken, puts a lemon in it, puts it in there, and 3 hours later, So it's interesting because you get to learn what the sun is doing.
Exactly.
Because you're turning it as you go. You're out there gardening. You come over with your, your clippers and your gloves and then your mitt in one hand. And so you're kind of doing all these things at once. So it's actually been a lot of fun. Hard work, I have to say. The before pictures and the after pictures demonstrate why I'm really tired. So it's been a hard transition.
A whole lot more work.
Yeah.
Growing your own food, maintaining your own electrical system for both of you, I'm sure. And yet more a sense of independence, that you can, you know you can survive, you know you can live there. So this is what, year number 2? As you go into, what, second summer, third summer now?
This will be my second summer.
So do you have plans to change what you're doing there on the ground?
Oh, absolutely. Loretta has fully investigated how many seeds to plant for a family of 1 or 2 or 3. And so literally yesterday we sat down and counted seeds to just be more specific, more efficient, and have a more well-rounded garden.
So your garden, did you do any preserving or drying of any of the things that you grew last year?
Some. We did some tomatoes, and that was basically, all we did at that point. But we have 22 fruit trees that are planted, so eventually we'll be able to be doing
22 fruit trees.
Right, yeah. So in over our heads.
So you, Loretta, chose to stay where you are living there in the Half Moon Bay area, and you too put in a garden.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A different kind of garden.
Yes.
Did you also work with reducing any of your energy footprint, any of your electrical uses, since you've got a different situation? You're more typical to a suburbanite.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a standard suburban house on a 6,000 square foot lot. We actually are still on the grid, but we did the minimal thing. Went around and changed all our light bulbs, and we live on the coast. The temperature doesn't really change very much, so we can actually go probably 3/4 of the year without turning our heater on. So we're pretty good in that regard. So we have plans to solar the home this year, but our initial response was, where is the food going to come from? And so I kind of just latched on to relocalization of food production. And so beginning with my own backyard. So my poor husband got drugged through making 16 boxes. And
let's take a look. We can take a look at
so here is our backyard, and it's a downslope. This is actually facing the ocean. So we had just about everything I could think of. We do have a coastal climate, so there are certain crops like tomatoes and peppers, the hot weather crops, that really don't grow too well. And those little mini greenhouses in the back are my attempt at growing some paste tomatoes. I generally can tomatoes every year, and I was attempting to grow some to can, and the crop failed. So this is from the other end. We have some trellises. My husband is the garden architect. So whenever we need poles or things lashed together, as an Eagle Scout, he just starts lashing. And so we actually have 16 sort of raised bed boxes. If we stay there, we'll probably eventually reformat it a little bit. But last summer we were able to grow about 80% of our vegetables that we consumed, and we thought that was pretty good for a first time out.
Impressive.
And this is just a higher view as we go down. We have, you can see the fence, and this is our attempt at these are potatoes growing in these large wine barrels, and then of course the herbs, and then my dog I rescued from Mexico. Her name is Chapala. We had a permaculturist from San Francisco come down and kind of take a peek at our place, and he was very encouraged that we were kind of doing these sort of creative container vertical type things. And so the potatoes grew well, and so did the carrots, actually.
Looked like you did real well there in the carrot department.
Yeah, that was very funny, actually. We had no idea that they were going to get that big. I would have probably picked them sooner, had they? Yeah, indeed. So.
And so you learned stuff. I mean, obviously, like Karen,
Exactly.
And I see probably for you a lot of work there too.
Oh, absolutely. We were exhausted, and we spent most of our weekends last year putting together our boxes and planning, because we don't have that much space, and so our planning was down to, we actually have been using the bed spacing recommended by John Javins and Carol Cox in their sustainable garden up there in Ecology Action. And so I've taken workshops from them, and so I've been using as much of their methods as I possibly can, just so I can grow as much as possible. And so the discovery of, who knew that celery really is that tall, and, just really discovering what food really looks like, and it is amazing, and it's been quite rewarding.
So it sounds like you're going to continue that track, both of you. I mean,
Absolutely,
just continue learning and maturing
Right.
and gathering that wisdom. I mean, that's part of being the lifeboats that you are, is gathering that wisdom from other folks and so on. So that's sort of the grounding of how you're responding. How about the personal side, the emotional? How do you deal with the conflicting feelings about peak oil? How do you work with your families in their responses? I mean, what kind of emotional roller coaster? I mean, has it been? What kind of emotions have you gone through about this, and what do you do about that to respond?
Well, I remember as I was reading Matt Savinar's book, I said to Loretta, how do you even, what's the first step? How do you even function on a day-to-day basis? Because you're living in one reality and you see this possible future. And she said, get your hands in the dirt. And so I had no idea how to do this. So I started when I was still near Nevada City, and I got myself doing that. And it actually did help, because I could see that my future, however it happened on a global scale or a community scale or whatever, I was wanting to be part of the solution, as it were, so that I was not so dependent. And that eventually, as chiropractors, we have this sort of image of being part of the healing solution as well. And so I thought, herbs, I'll just go to herbs, and so that was part of my process, but it's been really, truly, like you said, Janae, up and down and up and down, and trying to find this place where you can be at peace, because that's all I ever wanted in life, was just to be at peace. And I was like, how am I going to do this now? And take take some of the drama out of it, and to be able to say, you're literally using your adrenaline and all of the creativity and all that stuff by acting. And keeping my daughter in mind, how she responds to seeing me do these things, and having a creative future for her. She knows where the potatoes come from now, and all these other things. So that was kind of how it's literally combining the information with getting your hands in the dirt. And that was really one of the saving things. Ultimately, it's the solution is also the healing, and the connecting is the healing. As we had too many vegetables, people would come by, and you don't want anybody to leave without giving them some. And so you're making these connections on a community level as you go to, which again is part of the solution.
There you are. You're creating community. You're creating connections to yourself, to earth, to others. Nice. How about you, Loretta? How do you deal with that?
Well, we laugh about it. I mean, initially we had a lot of phone conversations, I was constantly interrupting my husband, we have to read this and we have to talk about that. And there were, waking up in the morning, like Karen said, you're feeling as though you have, two realities that you're dealing with, is a bit of a crazy maker, and actually feeling a little bit crazy a lot of the time. Because there is this information that you have, not everybody else has, that you're trying to share with other people, and sometimes the resistance when you're trying to share it with other people kind of bounced back and reflected back at me, when I would actually think, well, maybe I really am crazy, and so there was this sort of up and down. I think that as the days went by and the months went by, and the economy didn't collapse, and made it easier, and also seeing the successes, and then as the first year or 2 years went by with the garden, actually feeling more confident that I actually could take care of myself, made me feel better, and I feel in many ways that I have many skills that are going to be useful in this transition. So I feel a little bit more assured with that. And really, it is a day-by-day decision to not panic. Because some days the information comes at you through the news or whatever, and I start feeling that panic feeling again. And so we just have to make the decision at that moment to not panic and do the day as you've chosen to do it. So it's not like it's over. The emotional roller coaster is not over. It comes and goes in different waves. So,
in fact, I have a friend of mine who, I don't know if she coined it, but she said, Karen, this is like pre-traumatic stress syndrome.
Pre-traumatic stress, yes.
My friend, and that's it. I mean, it's like when you think about what it is to recover from that, you have to keep having these, these touchstones over and over again. But you should tell about the matrix thing,
Oh, I think that's just funny. I don't even know how we all started it, but we actually started looking at it as though it was the Matrix. We had,
from the movie The
Matrix,
yes.
the two realities of the Matrix. And once we swallowed the red pill, there was really no turning back. We were down that rabbit hole. And very often waking up in the morning going, okay, which reality am I in at this particular time? And even sometimes making silly decisions to not do something because you know that this is manufactured in China and it has to be shipped back here, and you don't want to be part of that economy anymore. So we laugh about things like, where are we going to get our underwear? Silly stuff like that. I mean, and so that's that whole being in almost the two worlds at one time, if that makes any sense.
The bubble is popped.
That's right.
Yeah. Right.
And you can't go back.
Right. Exactly.
And so, do you find that do you think that women, you yourselves or other women that you know, respond differently to this pre-trauma, if you will, this potential for big changes in our culture and all of our lives? I think women respond differently from men, and if so, how? What do women have to bring to this uniquely?
Well, I think we, not to disparage men, but I mean, we as women, we really do most of like the emotional work, on the planet and in relationships, and so we are sort of uniquely qualified in that regard. I mean, we tend to, and like I said, this is a generalization, but we tend to process our emotions, and when things get more difficult, and I think that as women generally, we'll be able to help that in that sequence of events to process emotions as well, and also to offer the other things, the more community things, the solidarity type of things, all of those issues. Whereas I think men tend to be solution-based, and so they're very much dealing with, sometimes, like Karen's husband is very much, let's fix this, and rather than the process of that. And I think that specifically, the emotional part of it, we're very, and then also too, back to the traditional women's arts, those were probably going to be very needed, and I'm quite happy about that because I have several of those skills.
Such as, give us some ideas of what are the women's traditional arts.
Certainly sewing, food preservation, cooking, educating the children, and I've done a lot of that. Our mother was very interested in teaching us how to do that, so we learned how to bake bread at an early age, and we learned how to can, and like I said, we've canned tomatoes every summer for a very long time. We sew. And
so you have self-reliance skills. I mean,
absolutely.
Part of this is getting back. That's that grounding again.
Right.
That you feel more confident because you're capable of doing more. Repairs and so on as we go along. For you, Karen, how do you have a sense of women's response different from men's? What do we bring to this?
Well, I think as a mother, I have a little bit different thing that I have to obviously deal with, and that is raising my daughter so that she can survive, but also that she can be courageous and think creatively and those sorts of things. And the feeling, that sort of deep, deep grieving that I think a mother has to do about her child's future I think is very different than it would be if I was just thinking about the end of my life or what my life was going to be like. And so I try to be, keep the arts in there, keep the creativity, take dance lessons, do those things, because she needs to have a foundation of joy, because the joy, I'm hoping, is what will eventually, if things kind of get very, very difficult, we need to have that. We need to have that ability to laugh and, play the piano for each other. We went out and we got a, used piano. I mean, things like that I don't know that, Kevin's like, well, how is that going to help us deal with peak oil? It's like, we have to be alive from here until the end. And
think about it. The piano, or just any instruments, the ability to create music, to express our hearts and our feelings in music or dance or visual arts or whatever, have been an essential part of human culture. I mean, we can't ignore culture.
Right.
It's not just about survival, is it? I mean, it's about prospering in a different way. We have to reshape, redefine what a new way of living is together that's closer. So thank you. Yes, the arts.
And Richard Heinrich talks about it, the survivalist mentality versus the preservationist. I mean, some people are going to be the artists and the people who are the poets and, that sort of thing, whereas maybe the rest of us are going to be doing more, growing carrots.
And a bit of all of that, I would expect. Yeah. I would think that what you're teaching your daughter about creativity and flexibility and being adaptable, and that you both have demonstrated in your lives. You've just turned your lives on a dime and are learning new skills and getting new confidence. I mean, that's part of what the young need for us to carry on. Okay, any last little thought here in our last few minutes you want to make sure?
We have a last little thought.
I mean, this is an ongoing journey for you both.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, we talk about the animals too. Loretta and I both have rescue dogs, and there's something about connecting back with the animals, and I think that they feel changes as well. I just, it's kind of intuitively feel that, but to be able to, be on the planet with them and everything else. I mean, looking at the earth in a whole different kind of a way, and it's not easy when you've come from suburbia, I think. Sometimes
it's compassion is what I hear. Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is Janaea Donaldson, and join us for next episode of Peak Moment, Community Responses to a Changing Energy Future.